you shake, that's responding to external stimuli, or something is moving around your body. So living organisms respond to, both plants and animals, they respond to that. So that is irritability. Then growth. For an organism to be described as living, it has to grow. It doesn't have to remain there. So an organism grows as a characteristic of its state. Then another one is excretion. Since organisms eat, that is, they feed, so they have to excrete. They don't just feed and feed and feed and feed. So they go through several processes after feeding, and the ones that are not useful for the body, or that are the ones that are poisonous or that are toxic to the body of the organism, they are being taken away from the body. So the process of taking away toxic substances from the body of the living organism, either plant or animal, is what is known as excretion. Then to the next one, reproduction. All living things reproduce, that is, they bring forth organisms after their kind. You see dogs having puppies, plants too have their own. So if there is no reproduction, there will be no continuity of life. So organisms reproduce, they bring forth their own kind, they give birth to children, so to say, they give birth to their own offspring to continue, so that when an organism dies, it doesn't go into extinction. We have other organisms of that same kind that are replacing it. Then adaptation. Adaptation is the ability of an organism to be able to adjust to its environment. Maybe there is a change in environmental condition, for instance, the temperature is high or the temperature goes low, or for aquatic organism, salt level has changed or it has reduced or either increased. So the ability of an organism to adjust to changes in its environment is what is known as adaptation, and every living organism has that characteristic. In one way or the other, they find a way of adjusting to the changes that occur in their environment. Then the last one, under the characteristics of living organisms, is competition. Living organisms have the ability to compete. What are they competing for? It's not inter-house sport. They compete for space, they compete for food, they compete for air, they compete for water. So everything that they need, it's not just one organism that is in a place. They have several of them. So they have to compete. And sometimes it's usually the survival of the fittest. That especially when the substance they are competing for is not enough and they are so numerous, so it will become the survival of the fittest. So every organism has the ability to compete for food, for water, for air, for space, for mates. So living organisms compete. So we've been able to talk about the various characteristics of living things. And I said characteristics are the features or the things you can easily see when you say this is a living organism. So these are the characteristics. And some people have been able to put it into acronym, Mr. Niger D. Mr. Niger D. If you look at the first MRINIGER, so I'm adding the AC to it. So Mr. Niger, but the basic, you have the Mr. Niger. So you can add some other things to it. We'll be looking at the differences between plants and animals. Living organisms are generally classified into two, plants and animals. But they are not the same, even though they are both living organisms. So we want to look at what makes them different. How is a plant different from an animal? So the first is that the body is usually spread in the case of plants. When you look at a typical plant, a typical tree, let's say a mango tree, you discover you find the branches moving, find several branches. The body usually spread. It's not just static, just one. So they have the body spreading. Unlike an animal, the body of an animal is compact. It's just there, it's fixed, it's straight. You don't have to come tomorrow and discover that a goat has added another leg, making 5. No. Plants have that ability, but animals don't do that. Then the next is that they have permanent large vacuoles and cell wall. They have permanent large vacuoles and cellulose cell wall. When you look at the cell wall of a plant cell wall, it has a cellulose cell wall. And this cellulose cell wall, what does it do? It helps the plant to be firm. It helps it to be in shape. Animals don't need that. They have another structure that helps them to achieve that same purpose. So animals don't have permanent vacuoles or cellulose cell walls. Sometimes animals don't have vacuoles, but when they have, they are very small. But plants always have large and sometimes or most times centrally placed vacuole. Then the next is plants possess chlorophyll. What is chlorophyll? As a part of the organelles of a plant cell, you have the chloroplast. We'll be talking more about that. But the chloroplast contains this chlorophyll. And what does the chlorophyll do? It helps the plant to manufacture its own food in the presence of sunlight, the process which is called photosynthesis. So plants can produce their food. They don't have to rely on other organisms. Unlike animals. Animals don't have that ability. They don't have chlorophyll. So they have to feed on this plant, feed on a smaller animal, and things like that. So they don't have chlorophyll. Animals don't have chlorophyll, while plants have chlorophyll. Another difference is that there is no specific organ for respiration and excretion in plants. They don't have specialized organ for respiration and excretion, unlike in animals. Animals respire via their lungs, their nose, and excrete via the skin, the anus, the kidney. Animals have specific organ for respiration and their excretion, but in plants, they don't have specific organ. Any part of the body that is closer to where excretion is being made can do the process. Then the next is that plants respond slowly to stimuli. When we're talking about the characteristics of living things the other time, I said irritability is a critical factor, a critical characteristic of living things. That is, they respond to external stimuli. Plants respond and animals respond, but the rate of response of plants and animals varies. Plants respond very slowly. For instance, let's say somebody takes a cutlass and cuts a part of a plant. Before you really see that the effect of that cutting on the plant, it will take several hours. But in the animal will quickly respond by either running or by shouting. So plants are very slow in responding to stimulus, while animals are very active. Before it even touches the animal, it has responded. Then energy requirements in animal is great. Energy requirements in animal is great. Animal is very active, and the energy requirement is great because they move and they are more active than plants. But animals, they are relatively inactive. They are inactive kind of, and their energy requirement is small compared to the animal. Also, food is synthesized from simple inorganic compounds in plants. Simple inorganic compounds, they manufacture their food from chlorophyll in the presence of sunlight. So they have simple inorganic compounds to get their food from. Unlike animals feed on complex, ready-made food. Feeds on these plants, feed on that plant, feed on this cockroach, feed on another smaller organism. So they feed on complex organisms. So, and they depend on ready-made food. So unlike the plants that they have their own food and they synthesize it from simple inorganic compound, the food of animals are ready-made and they don't prepare their own food. Organization of life. How is life organized? When you have a room that you have so many things in there and you don't even know how to move, when things are not organized, it's frustrating. But we thank God life is organized. So we want to look at how is it that everything is organized. There is a Swedish naturalist and taxonomist by name Carlos Linnaeus, who lived 1707 to 1778. He's from Sweden and is a taxonomist. What does taxonomist mean? His discipline is to name and classify organisms. So that's why he's called a taxonomist. He came up with developing a system for classifying and naming plants and animals. He's a great scientist and he really did a good job, Carlos Linnaeus. So he established and developed a pattern of classifying and naming plants and animals. So what we'll be looking at, how do we name plants and animals? He also established precise methods for classifying and giving scientific names to plants and animals. Why scientific names? For instance, in Nigeria, a particular plant in, let's say, Oyo State of Nigeria can even have about 3 names, 3 local names, that another person does not know that it's still the same plant you are talking about. When you get to America, they call it another name. When you get to London, it's a different name entirely. When you get to China, it's another name. So there will be confusion. You won't know it's the same kind of plant that everybody has been referring to, and you have about 20 kinds of names for a single plant or a single animal. So that is why this man, Carlos Linnaeus, came up with a universal or generally accepted way of classifying organisms, both plants and animals, and it is called the binomial nomenclature. What does it mean? 2 names, 2 ways. That is, each organism we have 2 names. It's not a single name. The generic and specific names. You'll be understanding what it means later in the course of the class. The generic name, that is the name of their genera and the name of that particular species. So it will be bearing 2 names together, 1 organism. Like you bear the surname and your first name. So it's all organisms, they have the binomial nomenclature. That is they have 2 names. So when you get to Nigeria and you mention those 2 names, and you get to London, everybody understands that it's the same organism that we are referring to. Classification of living things. Because of this method that Carlos developed, he has grouped